So Kyler writes in and says, it's very long. It says, hey, Zach, hope you're doing good. First of all, just want to say I've been watching you since like March or April. I think you had 15 or 20,000 subscribers at the time. So I just think it's awesome to see your growth. I think your analytical and personal viewpoint as a quarterback is so damn refreshing. Oh, I said dang. So dang refreshing. And I can't wait to see where you take the channel. Side note, you should sell some merch. Merch is coming. Can't wait. Merch is coming very soon. I have an announcement coming. I just can't talk about it yet. We're very, very close. On to the questions. He says, I'm a Falcons fan, and Lord have mercy, does it suck to be one right now? It seems like all Georgia teams can't finish, but regardless, what are your thoughts on the Falcons' struggles? It's hard to read aloud. It's very difficult. Do you think that it is largely due to post-Super Bowl expectations, with that season largely being a fluke, since we had an amazing coordinator in Kyle Shanahan, who I will root for wherever he is? Or do you think the reason why the Falcons have struggled is attributed to injuries over the past few years, or maybe that Dan Quinn has taken too much on his plate and the players both defensively aren't buying into a system, and similarly the offense not buying into the offensive coordinator? I feel like we obviously have a passing talent. I've never liked our running situation, to be frank, but I think you have. But do you think Matty Ice is a long-term option for us anymore, especially given the turnover-heavy season he's having? Sorry for the long question. You could definitely shorten it. I will not, Kyler. I like the question. It's Kyler's question. Okay, now here's a weird name. It's clearly a real name. It's not. It's Despot DLR says, hello, I found your YouTube channel recently, and your vids do help me a lot to understand the game better. As we in Europe just started to get an interest in American football, so I have a question about my favorite team, the Atlanta Falcons. I got to ask, you're in Europe. How do you become a Falcons fan? Like, is that the team you picked? And why did you pick them? I wouldn't pick the Falcons. I would pick, I don't know. Maybe you picked them when they were good in the Super Bowl. I have no idea. I just want to know, Despot, how did you become a Falcons fan? If you ever want to send me a message on Patreon DMs, that'd be a fun conversation to have. I'm curious. And if you want, I'll even read it aloud on the show because that'd be really fun. We can follow up on the narrative next week. How did this guy become a Falcons fan in Europe? Like, why did he choose the Falcons? Very curious. His question is, how can it be that our defense is in this terrible state and get worse every year, even though we have former defensive coordinator for the Seahawks and Dan Quinn as head coach and defensive coordinator, who is a big part of the creation of Legion of Boom? Why does it not work out in Atlanta? I know I screwed that up when I read it with, the inflection, whatever, but here's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing, what's wrong with the Falcons and why isn't Dan Quinn working? I want to compare Dan Quinn to his former head coach, Pete Carroll. Why is Pete Carroll successful and Dan Quinn is not? 2 reasons to me: culture and quarterback. Number one, the quarterback, Pete Carroll has had Russell Wilson bail him out of so many situations. I don't think anybody realizes, and I hope Pete Carroll does, how lucky he's been to have Russell Wilson. He has carried their team at times. The Falcons quarterback, Matt Ryan, is good. He's not as good as Russell Wilson. He's good. He's one of those guys, I love my girlfriend. I like my friends. I like Matt Ryan. I love Russell Wilson. Like and love are different. I like Matt Ryan. I don't love him. Matt Ryan cannot carry a team with a bad defense and a bad offensive coordinator. Russell Wilson did that for years in Seattle with Darrell Bevell. And I think that Steve Sarkisian, bad in Atlanta. And people talk like Dan Quinn doesn't know defense. Dan Quinn is a great defensive mind. He is. I like his mind. He knows scheme incredibly well. I heard someone, I think it was Pat McAfee, saying Dan Quinn was with the Seattle Seahawks and Legion of Boom, but he didn't understand Pete Carroll's system and why it worked. He just knew that it worked. That's not true. Dude, the guy knows football incredibly well. Of course he knows why it works. The difference is, the reason why Dan Quinn has not been successful and Pete Carroll has been, quarterback matters, and culture. The culture in the locker room. Think about Pete Carroll. I've seen interviews with Pete Carroll. I can picture his face. I can picture his smile and the gum he's chewing. Pete Carroll has this great personality and has built a good culture in Seattle. I can't picture. I don't even know what Dan Quinn's voice sounds like. I don't. I'm sure a Falcons fan does. I don't. Why don't I know that? Why don't I see ever pictures of him smiling on the sideline or encouraging guys? The culture that he's built has not been sustainable. He didn't build a long-lasting, sustainable culture in Atlanta. Those are the reasons why Dan Quinn has failed and is failing in Atlanta. He didn't have a great quarterback. He had a good quarterback that I like, I don't love, but he didn't have a Russell Wilson, so you can't carry a bad team. And he didn't build a culture that has bought into that system. Yeah, I love Alex Grinch is the defensive coordinator at Oklahoma. And I love Alex Grinch. I'm a big fan of his. He's awesome. I was there when he was at Washington State briefly. He did so well. He went to Washington State, then went to Ohio State, was co-defensive coordinator with Ohio State, did so well there. He got hired away to Oklahoma. Like, bam, bam, bam. Just his career has skyrocketed. And what I love about Alex Grinch is, yes, he's a guy who understands the game really well. He's a defensive genius. And Dan Quinn is a defensive genius, right? A lot of coaches are very, very smart with X's and O's. But what makes Alex Grinch different, and what I observed from Alex Grinch at Washington State, is that he is so good at bringing out the best effort from his players. That's all he asks for. He doesn't ask for you to be incredible or really good or really talented. He wants you to be. He recruits well. But all he asks from his players, it's a very fair thing to ask from your players. Give me your best effort. Put forth your best effort, and we will succeed. If you bring your best effort every single play, we'll win. And the guys at Oklahoma this year especially, their Oklahoma's defense is really good this year. Way better than before. What happened? What changed? Recruiting, and then Alex Grinch's guys have bought into him. They fight hard for their coach. They know that if they give great effort mentally and physically, they're in the right spot, they buy into the defense, that it's going to work and they're going to be successful. They've bought into Alex Grinch, and they've made a deal. We succeed if we give great effort every single play all the time. For whatever reason, that same deal has not occurred in Atlanta with Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn has not been able to bring that out of his players, that we're going to be in the right spot every time. We're going to have great effort and great technique. It's not that Dan Quinn doesn't know the X's and O's or the scheme. The culture in Atlanta hasn't worked. My name is Zach Schaumler. This is my podcast, Strong Opinion Sports. It's my favorite thing in the entire world. And I want to be very clear and open with the audience. My YouTube channel is monetized. What that means is that some of my videos make ad revenue. It's fewer than you think. A lot of them get claimed. But in the past, I've received donations from people on Patreon and PayPal. PayPal.me/Zach Schaumler. Patreon.com/Zach Schaumler. And because I'm making ad revenue, it felt kind of weird just receiving donations. I wanted to give something back for the donations. And so people who support me on Patreon can give me $1 a month, and that allows them access to a pool where they can ask questions. If you send me questions through Patreon's DM service, you comment on one of my posts on Patreon. If you give $1 a month, you can submit questions. And with my eyeballs, I look at every single question submitted. Then at the end of my podcast, I pick the best top couple questions and read them on the show and answer them in a segment I call Ask Zach. Now, that's for people who have money and want to support me that way. If you have no money to give, no problem. I totally understand. I grew up in a mobile home. I've been a broke college kid. I totally get it. But if you want to help in some capacity at the end, you can support the show by telling your friends about it. Share it on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever it is. Help me grow by telling your friends about this show. It would mean a lot to me. If you believe in my dream and you believe in this show, tell your friends about Strong Opinion Sports. Guys, my name is Zach Schaumler. Thank you so very much, and hope you have a great day.